Julie from Live for Art, and I'm doing more silicone testing. So let me tell you about a couple of things that I've already looked at. So this was one I did earlier when I was testing when to tilt how much to tilt the canvas before you get the cells up, and you can look at that. I'll link that video down below. But what I wanted to show you here is all these little cells, and this is caused by the floetrol. So the other thing that I've experimented recently to do is to try and leave floetrol out of the recipe. So this one doesn't have all those little cells, and I'm talking particularly about the Australian floetrol, which does create cells. And this one is without. So I've developed a pouring medium today that doesn't have floetrol in it. But what I'm actually testing today is two things. I'm wanting to demonstrate the difference that the paint consistency makes in terms of how the oil interacts with it, and I'm also wanting to look at how you're actually heating it, and how many cells you want. So I'm trying to do the two things at once. So my pouring mixture, it's one I've just made up, and basically it is, I'll put the recipe in, but on this I've got 150 mils of a pouring medium, and I've just used the Holcroft pouring medium from Riot Art in Australia. Not as good as Liquitex or other ones, but it's cheaper. I've got 500 mils in this bottle of varnish. I've got, that's 1.5 litres, 1.5 litres, 500 mils, 1 litre of PVA, and a litre, 500 mils of water. I'll put the details below, so don't worry about that. So what I've done is I've made up about 300 mils or half a pint of paint in each of these cups, and I've got it reasonably thick. I think you'd call that a mound on a mound. And I'm going to put some silicone oil in. I'm going to pour it into one cup, and then I'm going to thin it down a bit for the other cup. Ideally I could put this into 2 cups, but I just don't want to be so wasteful. So I've just got 4 colours today, and the white is the Artist Loft. There's these 2 blues from Amsterdam. One is Prussian blue and the other one is ultramarine. Ultramarine is transparent. Prussian blue, I'm not sure, it's got a line across whether it's meant to be semi-transparent. And then I've got this acrylic paint, again the Riot Art brand, which is called Blueberry, and I don't think they really say whether it's transparent or not in the area. So I'm just going with the 4 colours, and I've got the 2 canvases side by side because I want to try and do them and at similar time and let you see the differences. So I'm just going to put the oil in the cup. I'm going to pour hopefully half of each of these into this, and then I'm going to thin it down and pour it into that one. So I'm just using the 1000 CST dimethicone from Live for Art, and in this approximately 300 mils, I'm going to put 3 drops. So about a drop per 100 mils. And I'm just doing smallish drops. Can try and control it with this nozzle. Wait till it comes to a drop and let it, sorry, that's only 2. Yes, I'm doing all 3, yes. I wasn't going to do it in the white, but look, you can do it in all colours or you can leave some out. Some people leave the opaque colours out, which the white is, but it doesn't really matter. I've lost my lid. And I'm going to give those a reasonable stir in. And I'm going to do that simply by putting a bit of water in each of them. For some reason I've got more of some left and less of others. So I had tested previously that they're all the same thickness, but let's see how we go now. That one's actually got more paint in it, but still that's certainly thinner. Thinner but okay. So the other difference is, of course, that these are getting another stir around. So that's another variable, but it's hard to get everything. And just to match the others needs a little bit more. There's less in the cup, so I did less. Oh. Okay. So the thicker mixture has the advantage of having more paint in the cup. I'll have to tilt this one a bit more. Quite a bit more. But because it's thinner, it should move. It should spread more easily anyway. So if I was going to do it one way, I'm glad it's the way it is. We'll see how we go with those. Not quite an even match. Okay. I might just start one of these off like that. And the other one like this. Okay, well, I've probably got plenty of paint here, too much. And I'm just going to do that and that. I've got plenty of paint. In fact, I'm going to put some of this paint on the corners, so I think I'll need them. Over here, we'll know that those corners are different. Still got paint here. Okay, so I'm just going to let that sit for a minute and I'll do these ones. And this one's got more white. Okay, so what I want you to notice already, see how, before I've done anything, see how this thinner paint, the cells are coming up much sooner. So the thinner paint does allow the oil to move through it much more readily. Now that can be a good or a bad thing. You need to work out what's right for you. But what it does mean, but it also is going to change what happens when we move it. So I'm just going to give that for a minute without any heat to see what happens. So some cells coming up here. I can see some air bubbles. So I'm just going to start from on high. Just going to pop some air bubbles. Now I've gone down a bit closer to pop air bubbles, and you can see automatically we've got cells coming up in both, although these don't look big. These are looking nice, but the issue is that they've come up in their thin paint. It would be really interesting to see what happens when we move it. You can still see more air bubbles here, so I'll have to do some more painting, some more heating. And we want to anyway for some cells, but I don't want to overdo the cells. So this is the other thing. It's about what happens where we leave areas without torching, and where we can always torch more later and get some other little cells out maybe. Look at these ones coming now. So there was no evidence of that a minute ago. So we're just going to give it lots of time. Now, I know that that's going to be an issue there. I'm just going to put some of this in there, just to help it move when we're ready for it to move. Okay, so we've got gradually getting some other cells coming up here. So I'm going to give another little bit of a heat. I think I'm going to just maybe take some heat down this centre area and here. Okay, so not a lot's coming up in this this light blue area. I feel like there's other colours through there, but as we start to move and thin out the paint, it'll be interesting to see if that allows some other colours to come up through there. So we've got that patch where I popped down there. I might just do another little patch up here. Up here. There are some air bubbles there. Okay, so if you leave it at this, you'd probably think that the thinner paint here is better. We've got some lovely cells coming up. But let's just see now what happens when we stretch it. So I'm just seeing air bubbles here. Oops, there we go, that got a few more bubbles up, cells up. Just give these a minute now that I've done that. So again, I think I've been over that before and it didn't come up, but it's just taking it's slower to rise. The oil is slower to rise in the thicker paint. Okay. So we're just going to actually I think I'm going to go this other way first, just because I like these cells. And sometimes you lose them that last corner you go to. So got more paint, the weight of the paint here. Just going to try and gradually go down, without losing too much off the side. I like these little ones in the corner here. I just want to get over there so I can come back and stretch them out, but I lost quite a few. But see how that's all stretching out now? And we can see those cells that we had before, and they're just little, becoming bigger. And because the paint's thicker, it's more likely to keep the shape a little better. I like those bottom ones, but I think we're going to lose some of them. Okay, that's a weird little funny one I've got down there with the curve on it. I'll fix up the edges mostly later. Okay. Now this one we've got lots of cells. Let's see what happens as we stretch them. I'm right down near the bottom there. So I'm just going to go, normally just go from side to side, but I think I'll just go down there and just here. I really don't want to lose those little ones there, and that's a sort of different colour on the edge, but I'm going to leave it like that for now because I don't want to, so I'm just stretching them up as I move them. Oops, just touching the edge of the other one. Get it back onto the straight and narrow and clean my hands up, they're slippery. Okay. Now I'm just getting rid of the other paint that I put on there, which was from the other container. Just to make it. I actually think I had enough paint without it anyway. Okay. So, I mean, they're always going to go funny as they go over the edge, but I think, I don't know if you saw, but as I was moving it, I felt like that was bunching up a fair bit, and the cells have lost some of their shape there, and I've just got it right on the edge. I mucked up this edge here, so I'm just going to take it down this way a little bit, and I think I've got a fair bit of paint on here anyway. I find once you stop stretching and then try to take it back again, I'm going to have to take those corners off that I've. Okay, so we'll see now what happens when we put a little bit more heat at this stage. I suspect we'll get a few more little cells coming up in here. We want them to. I might just try this section here, see what happens there. See how those cells are coming up? So you can get more. I'll try over here and here. So even after you've stretched it out, there's still some oil underneath the surface, so that is going to still rise. And may still rise naturally even without heat, and that's why things change as you leave them. But obviously you can start, if you go less on the heat before you stretch, you can then still decide to do more if you want some more cells in a particular area. So I think these little ones here and these ones here are coming up after the stretch, and I think they're going to be really nice. It'll be interesting to see how they grow. There's something about this paint, which actually, interestingly enough, was the cheaper paint, that pale blue, that doesn't seem to be sort of working as well as the others in terms of allowing the oil to come up and create cells. Something about that is not interacting as well. So that's it. That's another factor, of course, is the quality of the paint and your mixtures. So I think these are going to really develop and be beautiful little cells. They're really nice. These have generally kept their shape better than the thinner paint. Although, I mean, this is still nice, and if you wanted to, you could move it a lot more and actually just have different patterns in effect, and this would be nice. Some of these little ones that are coming up now are lovely. I'll have to take it down and show you, and then I'll fix up the edges. So this is the thicker paint. See those little cells that are coming up now afterwards? They're going to be nice. And same with these other little ones here, which came up just with the second heat after the stretch. So this was just a pouring medium I made up today. I think it's quite good. I won't use this blueberry paint again. The Eldorado, no it wasn't, that was actually, what was that? Maybe it was it was this Eldorado de Paola. It's not playing nicely with the others, I don't think. Okay, so that's that one, and here's the thinner paint. And again, nothing wrong with it at all, except that if you want round cells, it's not maintaining the cell shape as well. But one of the things I do notice is, and I guess I did put more weight in it, but I think you've got more blending of the paint colours too because it's thinner. And that's also, that may be the look that you're after. So you just got to choose what it is that you want. So these ones here, look how they're growing. They were the little ones that I did afterwards. So again, if you've got thinner paint, you may be better to tilt quickly and then let the cells come up if you want to maintain the shape. Now that was 1000 CST, and I'm going to do an experiment, the same thing now with the thicker paint. But even the 1000 is thick compared to what some oils are. Many of them I think are 300 or 500 that they're using, and some are even lower. So that also is another factor, and we'll find out more about that in the next one. So, which one do you like the best? This time I'm going to use the 12,500. Now this is a really thick viscosity, so really thick silicone oil. I just had some great results with it when I was testing early on, and so I've got it as another alternative. The 1000 is probably best as an everyday use, but if you're perhaps an experienced person and you are able to, which way am I going to do those? No, these two go together. Able to think about and manage the sort of different consistencies, you might really like to try it as another option. So these are the same paints that I made up before. Exactly the same consistency as the one that I did with the 1000. So that's quite thick. It's certainly a mound on a mound. So I've got the colours today are the Holcroft Silver, Australian paint, and then we've got the Amsterdam green blue. So that's this one, but it's much darker. That's been because of the PVA in the mixture. That's making things look lighter. And then this one here is a mixture of that and some Artist Loft white. So that's in the same sort of tones. And then this last one is the turquoise. Now the turquoise isn't opaque, and the other one is transparent. I knew there was a reason I wasn't going to use that one. It is opaque. Okay, so same as last time, except I'll try and get the amounts right this time in terms of what I'm pouring in. So I'm going to, silicone oil, always forget. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 drops. Now this one is thicker, so you've got to squeeze fairly hard. And I say get the drop on the end there, and then just let the velocity coming down to take it down. Still do 3, I think. Could do less with this thick one. Could just do 2. I've got 300 mils in here. You could just try 2. I think I'll do 3, but I won't actually put it in this other one here that's opaque anyway. So now let's give that a stir. Alright, so now I'm going to make these thinner. I'm just going to put a little bit, oops, that may have been too much, water into each of those. So this is still an acceptable level for fluid art, I think, and just to so it's just making a sort of mound, but it's not really making that mound on a mound that the other mixture was. This one's probably slightly thinner. So just still making a slight trail, not as much, not much. Okay, so now I'm going to put that into these cups. Okay. Because this one's quite thick, it takes a while for it to actually come out of the cup. So let's try and get some more of this out. Handy on the edges. Take out this end where I've gone off. Just make sure I've got enough up there to cover that. Oops. Alrighty-o. So we'll give it a minute, see what happens. And it'll be interesting to compare it to the other one that we just did to see what the thicker silicone does. So far these aren't looking very different, whereas the other one, with the 1000, that was much more noticeable. So I think with the thicker one, it actually, my experience was it actually takes longer to come up because it's thicker coming through the paint, which certainly would, when you compare the two thinner paints, that would be the case. Although for some reason I'm seeing them come up here in this one. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit of heat from above, that bubble. Okay, I'm not quite sure what to make of this. I'm not seeing a huge amount of difference. So when I've just heated from above, I've gone down a little bit to pop some bubbles and I've got a few cells coming up. So I'm just going to do a bit more now. Battery troubles, I've had to move to my phone. Anyway, we're going to, they've had plenty of time to sit here. We're going to tilt them. So this was the thicker paint. I don't have as much contrast here on these paintings, although that darker blue will dry darker. just going to lose it off the side. Keep that other big one. Just bringing the paint down little bit by little bit. I'm going to have to go over here to get that corner, that side that's missing. And down to that other side. Moving a bit more than I'd like to. Let's get that one there by, I'll put it down. Okay, be interesting to see how this thinner one goes. Perhaps it didn't make it quite as thin as the first one. Quite a bit of paint on here, so I think I can take a bit off. I might just do that corner with my finger. So all the cells are down there, and I don't want to take them all off the side. So I'm just going to bring them back a little bit now. Sorry if that's hard to see. Okay. As I say, I'll fix up the corners, the edges later. Well, I don't notice as much difference between these two. It'll be interesting to see how they dry and how much more the oil keeps coming to the surface and developing. I've only got very subtle, the colours aren't as contrasted as the last one, I think. So I've wobbled this, look at this, we've got so many layers of colours around it, some of those cells, even though they're subtle. So what I think I'll do now is I'm just going to try a couple of patches with a bit more of heat. Go there and up here. And so what happens is, now that the paint has been spread out, there isn't as much paint there for the oil to come up through. So some oil that was stuck underneath can now come up more readily, and you will get these other little cells here, which are going to be quite nice. I did those two little patches. Again, you decide how much you want to do and where you want to do them. I'm going to do a little bit up here. Interesting to see how big they get. And I'll do the same here. There, up here, and over here. So with the thicker viscosity oil, it didn't seem as different in terms of how it came up through the different thicknesses of paint, which is probably a statement about just the oil, really. And I didn't notice as much difference when I was moving it about the cell shapes, although I think this one has overall maintained them slightly better than this one, but I did have to stretch that one because I had mucked up that bottom. So I've got some lovely little cells coming up down here. I think they'll just continue to grow and stretch and be nice. I really like what's happening here. I'm tempted just to do a bit more down there. And I need to do somewhere else here. Where will I do? A couple of them are coming there. I might just do some here in the corner. Yeah. So these are much more subtle, but you see how they've all just come up since the stretch and up here as well. Quite like these little ones, and they're all nicely round with rings around them. I'm going to pop a couple of air bubbles now. Ooh, what have I done there? I missed a bit. I've missed a bit coming over here, coming off the edge. Or did I touch it? I don't know what I've done there. I don't know how I missed that one. So I'm just going to need to move this over a little bit to that edge. And bring it back again. So I'm trying to stretch it back out so that I'm stretching the cells that I moved. Now we have got them running over the edge there now where they weren't. That's because we had to reach the edge. I'm surprised that the cells have come up on these after the tilt when I've heated. They've come up much better on the thicker one. So that's really interesting. Which is surprising me a little bit. I have to think about that one. Okay, so this is the thicker paint, and this is the slightly thinner paint. I don't think I had it quite as thin as the first one. So let's go back here and check out some details. Probably hard to see those cells when they were up higher, but there's lots of ones that are just subtle in colour. And then we've got these little clusters where I've heated after the tilt. And the thinner one, I think where I've heated after the tilt, they're actually getting bigger more quickly than the thicker one. So down here, I think some of these little ones here all came up after the tilt, and they've really stretched out because the paint's thinner. So I hope that's helpful in just thinking about some of the variables that you've got to play with. So today we've looked at the paint consistency and how the oil moves through the paint differently depending on the consistency of the paint. And we've also just tried to talk about gradually heating so that you get the amount of cells in the positions that you want them to be in. I hope that builds up your repertoire of things to think about. It's about 30 to 40 minutes after the pour, and I wanted to show you, this is the thicker paint, but the little cells that have come up have really maintained their shape. Well, nice shapes anyway. Whereas the little cells that came up afterwards, even here in the thinner paint, have really lost their shape. So the paint thickness hasn't been enough, the friction hasn't been enough to sort of hold it. It's just spread right out. The other thing I wanted to note is that I was thinking some of my little things were floetrol cells. There's no floetrol in this. So I think all those little white marks are just the air bubbles popping. So I have just made up the pouring medium today, whereas the one that I didn't get any of that in, I had made it up earlier, the day before, and had been sitting for some time. So that's the other little lesson here. But for me, the thicker paint consistency, which is like a mound on a mound, is much better if you want to hold the cell shapes. So that's the thicker one. And this is the thinner one with the 1000 CST viscosity lift-right dimethicone. So here we have the 12,500 CST dimethicone, and whilst at first they look very similar when it was coming up between the thicker paint and the thinner paint, as it sits, I think we're starting to see some of the differences. And again, the thicker paint is better. So these are the little cells. Sorry about the shadow. These are the little cells that came up after the tilt, and they are really holding. Whereas the little ones here, they're starting to really spread out. There's some down here as well. And overall, this one has still the cells and has spread out more than up there. So I think that the thicker paint consistency, if you want to keep the shape of the cells, is really important. But it's got to be not too thick for the cells to come up. If you looked at my other video on paint consistency, I think the pouring medium I used in that one, I had put in a different varnish, and I think that made it also help to make it hard for the cells to come up. But this is a thinner varnish. This was a Liquitex varnish that I added.